All right, let's dive right into this explainer and open the case file on the tragic 18-year saga of Natalie Holloway's disappearance. I really want us to put on our investigator hats today. We're going to examine the initial evidence, map out the timeline, and uncover exactly why justice was so severely delayed in a case that literally captured the entire world's attention. Now, as an investigator looking at this, there is one essential, absolutely maddening question that haunts this entire review. How does a prime suspect walk free when the whole world is watching? I mean, when an 18-year-old vanishes on a high school graduation trip to Aruba and authorities quickly identify the last people seen with her, you'd expect a swift resolution, right? Instead, we got nearly 2 decades of shifting stories, dead ends, and just unimaginable heartbreak. Let's figure out exactly how and why that happened. To reconstruct this timeline, we'll walk through 6 key dossiers. 1. The first 48 hours. 2. Suspects and shifting alibis. 3. A jurisdictional maze. 4. A mother's relentless fight. 5. Extortion, murder, and confession. And 6. Ongoing scrutiny and oversight.
Section 1. The first 48 hours. In any missing persons investigation, these initial hours are the golden window where facts are fresh and evidence is highly viable. And mapping Natalie's last known movements reveals a terrifyingly tight timeline. At 1:30 a.m., she was seen leaving a nightclub called Carlos and Charlie's with 3 local young men. A mere 12 hours later, she missed her flight back to the U.S. But what really stands out in this case file is the astonishing speed of her family's response. Just 16 hours after that missed flight, her parents arrived in Aruba via private jet. And get this, within 4 hours of landing, they actually gave Aruban police the name of the prime suspect, Joran van der Sloot, thanks to a hotel night manager. They literally identified the primary suspect almost immediately.
Section 2. Suspects and shifting alibis. Now we step into the interrogation room to examine the changing statements of 17-year-old Joran van der Sloot and his friends, the Kalpoe brothers. And the stark contrast between van der Sloot's initial alibi and his revised story is just glaring. At first, he claimed they dropped Natalie off at a hotel, that she fell getting out of the car and was approached by a dark-haired man in a security shirt, a classic deflection. But later, he completely abandons that story. He suddenly claims they dropped her at the Marriott Beach, and he eventually just walked home and left her sitting there alone, simply because he had final exams the next morning. Talk about a massive red flag. Once investigators started turning up the heat, their united front completely collapsed into a matrix of lies. Joran tested out a third story, claiming he was dropped off at home, and the Kalpoes drove off with Natalie. Meanwhile, Deepak claimed Joran texted him saying he was walking home, while Satish's lawyer said Satish just went to sleep and never drove Joran anywhere. As an investigator, when you have 3 suspects pointing fingers and completely changing their timelines, you know for sure somebody is lying.
Section 3. A jurisdictional maze.
To understand why these suspects weren't held permanently, we have to look at the jurisdictional friction and Aruban law. The Aruban legal standard created this incredibly frustrating catch-and-release environment. Under their system, authorities could arrest suspects on serious suspicion, which they did multiple times. But to keep them in jail, a judge required an escalating burden of physical evidence at periodic reviews. And despite massive searches involving the FBI, cadaver dogs, and even Dutch F-16s with infrared sensors, Natalie's body was never found. Without a body or a definitive crime scene, judges repeatedly ordered the suspects released, forcing the whole investigation into a painful stall.
Section 4. A mother's relentless fight. Let's shift our focus to the emotional core of this case, Beth Holloway's unwavering determination. She said, "What we want is we want justice. If we give up, absolutely nothing will happen." Man, that powerful quote captures the severe emotional toll on the family, but also Beth's unyielding refusal to let her daughter be forgotten. She knew if the world looked away, the suspects would walk away forever. So Beth essentially weaponized the media. She channeled her grief into highly effective, direct actions to keep the pressure on investigators. She founded the International Safe Travels Foundation. She pushed for political and travel boycotts of Aruba. She repeatedly confronted the suspects in international media, appearing constantly on shows like Nancy Grace, and even opened a missing persons resource center in D.C. She made absolutely sure the prime suspects couldn't just hide in obscurity.
Section 5. Extortion, murder, and confession.
Fast forward to 2010, and the case breaks open in the most twisted, audacious way imaginable. $250,000.
That was the price tag on Vandersloot's depraved plot to extort Natalie's grieving mother for the location of her remains. He reached out to Beth's lawyer, offering answers for cash. The FBI set up a sting, handing over $25,000 in wired funds and cash on a hidden camera. But true to form, he lied, gave a fake location, and then used that FBI advance money to flee the jurisdiction.
In a horrifying, almost unbelievable coincidence, Vandersloot killed again on May 30, 2010, exactly 5 years to the day after Natalie vanished. He had used the extortion money to travel to Peru for a poker tournament, where he murdered 21-year-old Stephanie Flores in a hotel room, allegedly after she found information on his laptop linking him to Natalie's disappearance. It literally took an extradition in 2023 for him to finally confess to the brutal reality of what happened in Aruba. Serving a 28-year sentence in Peru for Flores' murder, he was extradited to the U.S. to face the extortion charges. And as part of his plea, he signed a proffer letter detailing the horrific truth. He bludgeoned Natalie with a cinder block after she refused his advances and disposed of her in the ocean. It took 18 agonizing years to finally get that truth on paper.
Section 6. Ongoing scrutiny and oversight. Closing the investigation into the suspect doesn't mean closing the books on how authorities handled the case. The fallout from the 2010 extortion sting is actually still reverberating today. In October 2024, the House Judiciary Committee sent a formal letter to the FBI, impartially investigating the timeline of events. They are demanding documents to know exactly what the Bureau knew during that 2010 joint investigation into the extortion plot and why certain files haven't been turned over. Chairman Jim Jordan's signature represents Congress demanding answers as to why the FBI, despite knowing about the ongoing extortion, claimed they lacked actionable evidence to restrict Vandersloot's travel to Peru. Congress is scrutinizing that specific claim, seeking the underlying documents to see exactly what evidence the FBI actually had on hand before Stephanie Flores tragically lost her life.
Which leads us to this. When the truth takes 18 years and a second tragedy to emerge, is justice ever truly served? I want to leave you with that final, provocative thought as we close this incredibly heavy case file. We've mapped the inconsistencies, the jurisdictional hurdles, a mother's unbreakable resolve, and the devastating consequences of a suspect left to roam free. The mystery is technically solved, but the cost was astronomical. Thank you for joining me to unpack the evidence in this explainer. Keep questioning the facts, and we'll see you in the next one.